In 476 CE, a man walked into the city of Rome and took a simple step. He deposed an emperor. Many say it was the fall of Rome, but that moment was not sudden. It was the end of a story that had been unfolding for centuries. Rome did not fall in a day. It fell in decisions, in wars, in systems stretched too thin. This channel tells stories of history's turning points. We explore the people, the structures, and the choices that quietly reshaped the world. Not the heroes you expect, but the forces you cannot ignore. The fall of the Western Roman Empire is often framed as a single disaster, a final sack, but this is not just about an army crossing a river or a city breached. It is about why Rome could no longer defend itself against the pressures it had ignored for centuries, why the systems that had governed an empire of millions finally failed. By the late 4th century, the Roman world was no longer united as it had been. The empire had split in two, East and West, each with its own challenges. The West, though still powerful on paper, faced pressures both internal and external. Internally, Rome's military system was strained. Legions that once secured frontiers were reduced, underfunded, and increasingly dependent on mercenaries. The discipline and cohesion that had built the empire were eroding. Economically, the West had begun to falter. The fields of Gaul, Spain, and North Africa could no longer support the demands of Rome's armies and bureaucracy. Taxation strained citizens. Inflation rose, cities declined. And then there were the outsiders. Germanic tribes, long present at the borders, were now restless and organized. The Visigoths, Vandals, and Ostrogoths were not mindless raiders. They were states with their own ambitions, moving in response to pressures far beyond Rome. This was a system under stress. Every choice mattered. Every delay had consequences. Rome's strength had once been in logistics, law, and the disciplined use of force. By the 5th century, those systems were fraying. The critical moment did not arrive in 476, as many believe. It came decades earlier. In 410, when Alaric and his Visigoths entered Rome, the city had endured sackings before. But this time, the political and military machinery of the West could not respond effectively. The empire's generals were divided, often acting more in their own interest than for the state. Resources were misallocated, borders were left weak. Rome had survived crises for centuries through adaptability and discipline. By 410, that adaptability had waned. The sack of 410 was both symbolic and systemic. It revealed the empire's vulnerability. It showed that the West could no longer project power or enforce order even in its capital. Decisions, or the lack thereof, had created the conditions for collapse. The Western Empire faced choices, each with peril. Should it pay the Visigoths to leave? Should it commit the remaining legions to a risky defense of the Italian heartland? Or should it rely on diplomacy and hope the East would intervene? Every option carried risk. Resources were finite. Discipline could not be commanded if troops were unpaid, untrained, or uninterested. The empire's leaders understood the stakes, yet inertia and internal conflict prevented decisive action. In Gaul, military governors withheld support, fearing reprisals. In Italy, political factions argued over succession and authority. Meanwhile, the Germanic states were learning from Rome, exploiting weaknesses and waiting for cracks to widen. This was not chaos, it was calculated pressure. Every misstep magnified the empire's vulnerability. Rome's decline was not inevitable in the moment, it was the predictable result of failing systems. By 476, when Odoacer deposed Romulus Augustulus, it was the culmination of decades of systemic decay. The West no longer had the capacity to enforce its own will. The army was a patchwork of mercenaries. Tax revenue was insufficient. Political legitimacy was fractured. Yet the East survived. Constantinople endured for nearly another 1,000 years, illustrating that decline was not universal but structural. The Western Empire fell not because of a single battle or a single leader, but because the systems that had once made Rome resilient had been undermined over generations. The fall was orderly in its own way. Odoacer assumed power and maintained Roman administrative practices. The machinery of government continued, even under new rulers. The end of the empire was not a sudden rupture but a slow transition, a reallocation of authority from one system to another. The collapse of the Western Empire reshaped Europe permanently. Central authority vanished. Local powers filled the vacuum. Germanic kingdoms emerged. Trade routes shifted. Cities contracted. The foundations of medieval Europe were laid not in conquest alone, but in the failure of systems to adapt. It also reframed the role of Rome itself. No longer a political entity, Rome became a symbol, a center of culture and law that would survive even as the empire's military and administrative structures crumbled. The Church, the new custodian of order, inherited the mantle of authority, shaping Europe's next millennium. The fall of the Western Roman Empire was not a story of dramatic collapse, but of gradual, systemic failure. It teaches us that power is only as enduring as the systems that uphold it. Discipline, logistics, and foresight matter more than singular acts of courage or violence. What story of history's turning points should we explore next? Let us know in the comments. And if you want more stories that reveal how decisions shape the world, consider subscribing.